I might post a video if I read a book that I'm like, this book.
Hello again. I'm back. So I'm here to review The Cruel Prince, which I actually read at the beginning of quarantine, and then I was like, I should do a review on it. And then I never did. So now I'm doing a review on it. You may notice I'm in a different place. This is my new room. I switched rooms with my sister. And here we are. Hallsbury Castle. There's a Totoro right here. Okay, anyways. So I'm reviewing The Cruel Prince today. I think that this was recommended to me a long time ago by my friend Meg. So if you're watching this, Meg, thank you. Just so you know, I was not a fan. So you don't need to watch this if it causes you pain. Anyways, this book follows our main protagonist, Jude, and her two sisters, Taryn and Vivi. Jude and Taryn are mortal, and Vivi is a fairy. Their mom had Vivi with a fairy guy, and then fell in love with a human, and then ran away and had Taryn and Jude. However, the fairy, who was the father of Vivi, shows up and brutally murders the parents right in front of all the children, and then is like, you guys have to come with me to Fairy, which is the name of the world. That is the name. And so that is the premise of this book. So I will now be getting into the non-spoiler review, so if you've never read this book and plan to, you're in the right place. Right off the bat, this book was dedicated to Cassandra Clare, who wrote the Shadowhunter series, which I'm not a fan of. I was concerned from the beginning. And this fairy murders the parents right in front of the kids is really just brushed under the rug for the rest of the book and doesn't really play into anything later at all, and it's ignored pretty much, which I found annoying. The world building in this book is the most basic fairy world. In the beginning, there's a map, which I was excited about because I love maps, but none of those places really come into play, and there's a lot of places that are mentioned that are not on the map, and I was very confused about that, so I thought that was bad because I love maps, but not when they're incorrect. And I love the idea of fairies and incorporating them into a story, but you've got to add your own twist. The world adds really nothing to the story. It's just a teen drama that's set in fairy world, which is really disappointing because I love fairy worlds and I love all like the lore that surrounds them, but this one just was boring. There was just way too many descriptions in this book. It made the action just slow and hard to follow because the author was just describing everything that Jude was seeing. Every time Jude walks into a room, she describes everyone's outfits. Why? And the general writing style was very meh. And it was, to be honest, kind of Wattpad-y, like Wattpad, you know? Especially at the beginning, it was just over-dramatic and really driving obvious points home to the reader. There was an attempt at a super cool twist, but I was honestly underwhelmed with it, mostly because I really had no idea what was going on. There was just so many unnecessary points that were covered throughout the whole book that I was kind of like learning why I was supposed to be surprised instead of just being like, oh, so this is happening. I had to catch up on all the plot points that were happening. There was also a giant plot hole in this book that is so flimsily covered, and it drove me crazy. The pacing of this book was also terrible because the entire first half of the book there is no central conflict at all. And everything that happens there is so anticlimactic because it leads nowhere. The second part of the book had a lot more happening, but because the first part of the book was so slow and boring, it just made it seem so rushed and like so much was happening and I was very confused. Let's talk about Jude, shall we? The author seems to be trying to make her this really like morally gray, like really intriguing, awesome character. Wow. She ends up as just the most basic cookie cutter YA protagonist who's like, I'm a strong female character who can fight but am too clumsy to dance, and sometimes you're gonna think I'm like a literal monster because some of the thoughts I have are so terrifying. Like, there were several moments that I was genuinely concerned. She's so inconsistent too, and just some of the decisions she makes. Her twin sister Taryn is really not necessary to the story at all. She could be taken out and everything would pretty much be the same. She's just annoying. Also, every single romance in this book is so toxic and empty and stupid. The romances are either with your basic cookie cutter YA abusive love interest, or they're with an actual sociopath. There is no in between. The author attempts to do this enemies to lovers thing, and it falls flat on its face. It's so bad. So I was not a fan of this book, and I'm probably not gonna read it later. So we will now be jumping into the spoiler review. I have so many problems with Madoc murdering Jude's parents. In the fairy world, I was expecting sort of like a revenge story to happen, and that actually would have been kind of cool to have happen because all of like the politics in this book were just really stupid, and I wasn't invested in any of them because Jude honestly shouldn't have been invested in any of them because literally everyone in this world hates her, so why would you care? Same. The only thing that I think she would logically care about is the person who murdered her parents and maybe getting revenge on him. But no, instead we get, and I quote, "Despite myself, despite what he'd done and what he was, I came to love him. I do love him." Vivi is the only logical character in this whole book because she actually like has an issue with the fact that Madoc murdered their parent, and no one else does. Like, Taryn and Jude are totally chill with it. They're like, yeah, he's like a father figure to us. We're good. Jude hates Carden, who's like the bully at school who like bullies Jude and Taryn. She hates him more than she hates the literal murderer of her parents. How does that make sense? How does that make sense? And it doesn't help that Madoc is literally such a flat, boring character. His only personality trait is that he's actually evil. Like, he has a cap that he dips into his enemy's blood. I remember there was some sort of passage in this book that was like, yeah, so sometimes I like to look at the cap and try and see, and it's like rusty brown colors where my parents' blood is. And I was like, I came to love him. I do love him. You know? So that it's like that kind of thing that I'm like, why do you still care about this person? It makes no sense, and it made it so annoying to read. The world in this book is, like I mentioned before, so basic and just like the bare minimum, really. And I really like the idea of fairies and incorporating the like lore and stuff of fairies into your world. I really like that, but I've never seen it done well. Like, you have to change something about it. You have to put your own twist on it. You have to add something to it. You can't just use the same stupid world. And it doesn't help that a lot of the things about that world were so vague, and they would like mention certain aspects about it, or they'd mention some creatures or whatever, and then move on and never explain what those things were. So you'd just be left wondering, like, well, what was that creature? What was this part of the world? And it doesn't help my confusion when, instead of describing like actually sort of interesting things about the world, you describe every single person's outfit, especially when they're ugly outfits. There were times also where Jude would just straight up tell the reader, like, I bet this person is thinking this. Just narrating everyone's thoughts. And it was just kind of condescending because a lot of the things that she was saying were very easily inferred. And that just kind of adds to the exaggerated Wattpad style that this book is written in. You have to let your readers just, like, assume things, and you have to be able to trust your reader to understand what you're talking about. Also, why would you go into first person after a third person prologue? I don't have anything particular against first person, but I find that typically in YA, when it's in first person, I tend to not like the book. It doesn't help that in the prologue where it was third person, I could not figure out whose perspective it was from and what was going on, and it was just so confusing to me. It started out from like Vivi's perspective, and then it changed to like Jude's perspective, and then it was like Terrence. It was really weird. And you can like switch perspectives when you're in third person. Like On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness does this right here. On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness does this actually really well, where it will like be from Jenner's point of view, but then you can clearly tell when it's switching perspectives. It's like when the camera changes. But with this one, it's just like the camera's shaking all the time. I can tell that the author was trying to make this book this like high stakes, political, like, ooh, spies, betrayal sort of book. But I couldn't keep track of everything because there were just so many info dumps about unnecessary things that were going on. You just get a page and a half about this one diplomat, all of their history and all of their motives and all of like what they wanted to accomplish at this like summit or whatever, and you would literally never meet that diplomat. It didn't matter at all. I don't know why it was still in the book. So you just have all of this information in your head about very specific people and characters in this world, and then like you wouldn't understand the most basic things because they weren't explained properly, or they're explained in like paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, which is really annoying to read. The worst part of this info dump issue that I have with this book though is chapter 6, where Jude literally tells the reader, like, here's a highlight reel of all the terrible things that have happened to me in Fairy World, and then lists them out in a numbered list. Why would you do that? I cannot think of a better way to remove the reader from empathizing with the character than just listing it out so bluntly. The worst is when she spoon feeds the reader at the end. She says something along the lines of like, what I want you to take from this is that every single fairy hates me to my core for being mortal. And that's it. That's what she says. She tells you what you need to think. And it's one of the laziest things I've ever seen. It's just, she destroyed several moments that could have been cool background chapters, and it would have like brought us closer to Jude, and it would have helped us understand why they never stood up for themselves ever against Cardan and the bullies that were there. And that leads me to the big, huge plot hole in this book that is just glossed over. Why doesn't Jude go back to the human world? She's told us that she has gone back to the human world, and it's very easy to escape to the human world. And you know, you would think that if every single fairy hates your guts for being mortal, you think that you might want to like leave. And she just establishes that the fairy world is full of murderers and terrible people, and there have been paragraph after paragraph of the paralyzing fear that's come with living in fairyland. But then as soon as she's in the fairy world, she's like, I just don't feel right. It's such a lazy excuse. The pacing of this book was also terrible, as I mentioned previously. The entire first half of the book, there's nothing going on. The whole point of it is to make you hate Cardan. She does an awesome job of making you really despise Cardan, which is just thrown away in the second part, with zero redemptive arc and not even a basic apology. It just goes straight to romance in the second part, and he didn't even give her like a, sorry for that, I apologize. No. In the first half, there's this tournament that's like talked about, and it's like this huge thing that she's preparing for, but it never leads to anything. The tournament's over in like a page and a half. They've spent like forever building it up. She's like, I really want to go to this tournament. And it ends up being literally nothing. After that, it's completely dropped. She's like, I want to be a knight. I want to be, or like whatever like knight thing there is in fairy world. She wants to be a knight. She's like, it's my life goal to be a knight. And then afterwards, she's like, I don't know, maybe I could be a spy. Then in the second part, she gets to spy, which is actually kind of cool, but it is not explored anywhere near to the extent that it should have been. All the spies that she was with could have made such a cool group of friends. They had so much potential, but it was kind of abandoned. It was introduced as this ragtag team of spies that like sneak into things and discover secrets and all of that. And I think that's pretty cool. But we never see the other spies. Like, we see them in one scene, and then they're kind of gone for the rest of the book until the very end, which is honestly such a letdown to me, because they could have been so cool. And we really only see the roach and the ghost, because like the ghost trains her, and I don't even know what the roach does. He's just there. The bomb played no role in anything. Like, literally no role. She could have been removed, and it would have been the same. Through the spying, we were introduced to a lot of the politics of the book, which could have been great, but it was really confusing. We didn't get enough of, like, a central conflict even in that part. It was just Jude, like, sneaking around, and that was it. Like, kind of discovering secrets, but I didn't really know what the secrets were, like, leading to, or, like, I didn't even get a sense of what she was trying to figure out. Because her missions were just like, find out information in this place. I always felt like I was playing like catch up, and I was trying to absorb everything that was happening, and I was always behind what was going on. When Bale King killed the whole royal family, eventually I kind of became desensitized to it, because he starts killing people and you're like, oh, okay, so things are happening now. And then like, he just keeps killing everybody. And suddenly there's like 14 people dead on this stage. And it didn't help. Like, I would have been more shocked and more invested in it, and it would have raised the stakes a lot more had we gotten to know those people. But the one person we knew wasn't even on the stage and wasn't killed. And I didn't, like, we kind of knew the people. We'd heard like maybe 2 or 3 of the names, but some of them we were introduced right before they were killed, which made it just seem so anticlimactic. I didn't care. It really seemed like just for shock value. Like, she was just killing characters, and she was like, see, I am not afraid to kill characters. And then Jude was like, oh my gosh, this is such an interesting development. I must get to the bottom of this. But like, why do you care? No one likes you here. They've tried to kill you. Like, they tried to murder you. There's this whole like thing where Vivi's like, you should come with me to the human world. Like, I hate it here because this guy killed my dad and everyone's fine with it. You know, like, you should, like, come with me and we can go to the human world and it'll be great. And Jude's like, no, I'm fine. So let's get into more in depth about Jude. As I mentioned before, she's kind of a monster. When she was in the human world, she was looking at all of the families and she said, and I quote, I don't imagine myself back in a life like theirs. What I imagine is going over there and scaring them until they cry. Ooh, quirky! I don't even understand why you would do that. Like, why would you, what? Does she resent them for being happy? Like, Jude sees this human girl and she tries to help her escape, and the human girl just can't comprehend the fact that fairies exist, so she commits suicide. And then Jude's like really guilty about it, even though she like tried to rescue the girl from being a mindless like servant, which, okay, I can understand being guilty for that. But then she kills someone and stuffs them under her bed and doesn't feel an ounce of remorse. And this is what I mean when I say she's low-key kind of terrifying. 'Cause like, she has this thing with power, and where she needs it to protect herself and her sister, which I can understand. That's a good motivation for a character to have. But then she starts to want absolute power, and there are just a lot of really creepy things she says that have to do with power. And you know what? I think it would actually be really interesting to see her kind of go really dark and start wanting absolute power and become kind of almost an antagonist. But the thing is, the narrative, I don't think, understands what she's saying is creepy. She has a very anticlimactic showdown with Maddox, where she says something like, you only want the crown for yourself, you just want power. And literally like a couple pages back, she was like, I just wonder what it would be like to be the king and to be able to control everybody and to control anyone and make them do anything I want. Like, she's also stupid and really annoying, and some of the things she just says, I'm like, why? Cardan says something like, you don't really think you can win against me, and she's like, no. And I hated reading from her perspective because she's just that unlikable and annoying and stupid, and she says things like that all the time. Taryn really annoys me. Like, Jude stands up for her and is like, hey, stop making our lives terrible. And she's like, Jude, you're such an idiot. I hate the love triangle with Jude, Locke, and Taryn in this book. First of all, Locke is not a good person from the start. They try to play it like he starts out being this like really charming, really nice guy, but then turns into someone creepy and weird, like, which, okay. But he wasn't good from the start. He threw them in a river to drown. Cardan said later, like, I never wanted you to drown, which, wow, great apology there. But Locke didn't know that. Locke thought that they were going to die. He never stood up for them. He never defended them. He just sat on the sideline and watched them get thrown into a river. I think he actually was the one who picked them up and threw them in the river. He's just as bad as Cardan, if not worse, because he just sits by and does nothing. And the only reason that this exists is to pit Jude and Taryn against each other, which I am so not here for. It makes me really not like Taryn because her character is just so unnecessary. It's there to make added drama with Locke, who, by the way, is terrible. And I just hate that these two sisters are being pit against each other by someone who's a bad person. Yeah, so this entire subplot did nothing but make me hate all the characters more, especially Taryn, because she literally gave up her sister for a guy. Why would you do that? The reason Locke chose Taryn over Jude is because he put them through a series of tests to test her love for him. Yeah, so that's like his only personality trait. He wasn't even interesting to begin with. I was just not invested in the romance between him and Jude. It was just so empty. They had no chemistry together, and it didn't make any sense to me why it was happening. When Jude found out that it was Taryn that Locke was like with or whatever, betrothed to, I don't know, she literally challenged her to a duel and almost killed her. Like, she took her sword and swung at her head, not intending to miss. And the only reason she didn't was because I think it was Vivi who put them under a curse, like, not a curse, but like a little spell to make them freeze so that they wouldn't kill each other. Like, she was about to kill her sister over this guy, Locke. That was annoying. So there's obviously another romance here, and it's the enemies to lovers. So let's talk about that for a little bit, shall we? Enemies to lovers is a trope in which there are two love interests, and they start out as like enemies and they hate each other, and then slowly they become lovers. But there's so much in between the enemies and lovers stage, and in this book they go right from enemies to lovers. If one of the characters was mean or cruel, they need to go through some serious character development and apologize before like they can even begin to be friends. They need to learn from their mistakes. It can't be a super quick fix. It can't be like instantaneous kiss immediately situation. The best redemption arc that I know of is Zuko's redemption arc from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Zuko had to go through so much, like, internally by himself before he could stand up against his dad. By the way, If you have not watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, it is on Netflix. Go watch it. It's a good show. It doesn't help the fact that Cardan is literally the worst person ever. And he's just mean for being mean. That's why he's mean. Literally, as I mentioned before, the entire point of the first half of the book is to make you hate Cardan. Here's a quote from Jude. I hate him more than all the others. I hate him so much that sometimes when I look at him, I can't breathe. That doesn't sound like someone who has a crush on someone. Here are some of the things he's done. As soon as we meet him, he tears off the wings of a fairy for not bowing to him. And this is mentioned by Jude as being typical. He kicks dirt in their food. He threatens to use his magic to make them eat it, and then lets his friends insult and belittle Jude and her sister, calling them lesser for being mortal. He throws Jude and Taryn into a river with Nixies, which are creatures that will pretty much pull you under the water and drown you, and also dumps all of their stuff in the river. Later, Cardan's like, I never wanted to kill anyone. I wasn't ever gonna kill anyone. But he never said, I'm sorry for throwing you in a river. He forces Taryn to swear to abandon Jude and then kiss him. He tells Jude that she's deserving of death. He can't stand anyone defying him or thinking less of him, and thus continues to humiliate Jude. And he shoves drugged apples he shoves drugged apples down her throat. And then when Jude is under the influence of the apples, him and his friends throw away her salt, which is like the antidote, and then they make her take her clothes off. And he would have made her kiss his foot if Locke hadn't stopped him. And Locke only stopped him because he had ulterior motives. Everyone here sucks. It doesn't help that Cardan is so creepy. Jude finds a piece of paper while snooping and doing her spying stuff with her name written over and over and over and over again on it. Like, it's like an entire, they show it in the book, it's like an entire page, and it's like, it's completely filled with just her name. That's not romantic. That's creepy. When she's like, hey, what is this? He's like, I like you. This is peak YA terrible romance. There's zero build-up to their romance, to their, like, there's nothing. There's no apology from Cardan at all. She's literally interrogating him because the whole royal family has just been killed, right? So she's trying to figure out what to do, so she's interrogating him as to what's going on. And they just kiss randomly. It came out of the blue. I was very concerned. Here's a quote from Jude. It occurs to me that if I kill him, I can finally stop thinking about him. If I kill him, I won't have to feel like this anymore. Do you ever just have a crush so bad you're like, I'm gonna kill this person? Cardan then proceeds to say that it's Jude's fault for being so great that he likes her. And then she moved to kiss him, and I was like, here's a quote from that. It's a heady feeling, having power over someone. To be honest, I kind of liked the idea of her like messing with him and being like, loser. But no, she kisses him anyway. This is not cute. This is not cute. I'm not happy with this. And I hate this narrative because it's showing people that when someone is mean and cruel to you and chucks you in a river, they just like you. They just actually like you. No, it's not true. If they chuck you in a river, they hate you. He's attractive though, so it's fine. It's all forgivable because he's attractive, guys. It's fair. It's great. There's also just some really weird quotes and stuff that just makes no sense in this book. Here's a quote from the book. 3 is an odd configuration of sisters. There's always one on the outside. I have 3 sisters? Or 2 sisters? We're a group of 3. It's you, Charlotte. You're the one on the outside.
You're rude.
I feel like no one ever thinks that or says that. I don't know why this was like a point in the book. Here's another quote. I have always been scared since the day I got here. I was raised by the man who murdered my parents, raised in a land of monsters. Despite myself, despite what he'd done and what he was, I came to love him. I do love him.
I do love him.
Here's another quote. Vivian's smirk had turned nasty. A wash of rage passes over Madoc's face. Taryn and I don't dare bait him for fear that his patience with us stretches only so far. Go back to the time when she said, oh, I love Madoc so much. He's so great. I love him so much. He's like a father to me. Here's another quote. A male goblin, scarred, his skin the color of green ponds. His nose was long and twists fully around before bending back towards his face like a scythe. Like, what does that even look like? Like, does it twist all around his head? I was so confused about that. Quote, Madoc must have loved your mother very much, Oriana says. Shows up and brutally murders the parents right in front of all the children. And then is like, you guys have to come with me. The fact that the fairy world is called Fairyland and is sometimes called just Fairy. Like, how uncreative can you get? That's like no Madge level. Also, literally any time Cardan says something and Judah's like, he's just so charming. Cardan is literally talking to a door here. Like, I'm not kidding. He is talking to a door. Quote, I'm not entirely surprised into a scream when the door's eyes open. My prince, it says. My door, he replies, with a smile that conveys both affection and familiarity. It's bizarre to see his obnoxious charm used for something other than evil. He was talking to a door. I'm also very confused why Jude needed to dramatically poison herself for months just so she could pull a Princess Bride. Like, there's literally no reason for you to have to drink the same drink as Madoc. She could have just been like, oh, I don't really care for this wine. With the spies, they each have like a nickname and they're like, you'll get your nickname when you earn it, which, okay. But then they give her the nickname the Queen and they're all like, oh, that's so cool. That's such a cool nickname. Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. And I don't get it. I don't, like, is it because of Cardan? You know, like, I don't. Anyways, I wasn't a fan of this book, but thank you for watching. I think that's all I have to say. Charlotte! Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any books that you want me to review, I might do another one of these just because why not? But yeah, I think that's all I have for you. Okay, bye. Thanks for watching.
Good job.